Hi, welcome to Les Do Books. I'm Tara, and you can email me at tara@thelesbianreview.com with any questions or comments, or come join our Facebook group, the Lesbian Review Book Club. I'm joined today by Sheena, founder of the Lesbian Review and the Lesbian Talk Show. Welcome, Sheena.
Yay! I'm so excited to be here. And please, people, email Tara because she gets very sad if you don't, and then she tells me all her woes, and really just email her.
I think I've gotten one email ever.
Sure, but that's an important email. So you need to email Tara. It's very important that you do.
And actually, you know what? If you want to email me, why don't you tell me which authors you want me to talk to on the podcast, or what themes you think would be interesting to hear about. So now you actually have something to email me about. But Sheena and I are actually here today because we want to talk about what happened in Lesfic in 2017 and what we think is going to happen in 2018. We're going to look at Sheena's 2017 predictions, whether they came to pass, and the other trends that we saw. And then we're each going to share our predictions for 2018. So Sheena, what were your big predictions for 2017, and did they happen?
My biggest one for 2017 was audiobooks and an increase in audiobooks, and it did happen. And I suspect we're going to see an even bigger increase going into 2018. And why I think this is such a great thing is because you have to produce the product before you're going to get the listenership, right? So you need to have a lot of really great audiobooks in order to start convincing people to keep listening to audiobooks. And the interest in audiobooks is most definitely growing. And I think 2018 we're going to see even more of that. And I'm excited about it. Most of the publishers are getting into audiobooks in some form or another. Even some of the independent authors. I'm stoked. Audiobooks are brilliant. And I can't wait to hear more of them.
So, if you could pick, like, your top, I was going to say one, but that's just cruel. If you could pick your top, like, handful of Lesbian books that you want in audio that aren't there yet, what would you pick?
I'm actually not going to do that, and I'll tell you why. It's because it's books I haven't read. I'm not like you. I can't read a book and then listen to the audiobook. I hate the audiobook then. Hate it. For me, it has to be a book I haven't read, and then I love it. Like, I just finished Timeless by... Who did Timeless?
Rachel Spangler.
Yes, that's it. I just finished Timeless by Rachel Spangler, and it was brilliant. And I loved it because I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't have a picture in my head of who the characters were yet. So the narrator took me through this story, and I was just captivated. It was brilliant. It was wonderful. And if you're listening to this, you should totally get this audiobook.
And I have read it before, and I do like listening to books that I loved reading on my Kindle, so I'm going to get that one, because I think it's hard to say. I was about to say, I think it's my favorite Rachel Spangler book, and then I remembered that this year she also released two others that I want to call my favorite, so it's like my two favorite kids. They're all my favorite. But it is really, really, really good. Timeless is an excellent book. Highly, highly recommend.
Absolutely. It's well plotted. It had some funny things where I was like, how is she going to handle this as a plot point? Because it's such a kind of a sticky situation, right? Because the main character goes back in time into her teenage body. And I'm like, so she's thinking like an adult, so she's got all these grown-up thoughts about relationships and stuff, but she can't possibly be in a grown-up relationship because she is a child, or a teenager at that point. So how is Spangler going to get around this one? And she actually handled it really well.
It's so good. And I hate time travel books. And I'm not saying this is totally a time travel book. I'm trying to figure out how to say this without spoiling anything. Anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is I should not have liked this based on the premise. And I actually loved it. Like, wholeheartedly loved it.
So that was my one prediction, was a rise in audiobooks. And we've seen a brilliant rise in audiobooks. And I'm totally excited about that. I think we're going to continue to see a great rise in audiobooks. We have got, I believe, some of the best audiobooks in any kind of fiction. Mainstream, not mainstream, because I've tried to listen to some of the mainstream books and I'm just like, ugh. The production value of lesbian fiction audiobooks overall is a much higher quality. We've got really, really excellent narrators. And the kind of books that we're choosing to produce into audiobooks are generally ones that work. I'm not saying all the audiobooks are brilliant, because they're not. But I'm actually really stoked at where lesbian fiction is and where we're heading, generally. Another prediction was pirate books. I thought we would see a rise in pirate books, and we did, and I'm very happy about that. Pirate books are great.
Did you you did, didn't you?
I
You
did.
just said "R" like a pirate. Yeah.
I did.
Okay.
That,
Okay. Now we just need more lesbian pirates in space, and I think, life will be complete.
Indeed. I think, though, next year we're going to see a rise in across-time romances. Okay? So...
All right.
The book we just got that we were just talking about from Spangler is what I refer to as an across-time romance. So it's a romance that happens in 2 time periods. So whether it's somebody that travels backwards in time to a younger self, somebody that crosses a portal, across-time romances, I think, are a very underrated type of book, and it is one of my favorite genres. So you call it time travel books and you hate them. I'm betting you actually love them, you just don't realize you love them.
You know what? I actually think the problem is that, so in high school, when I was stealing my mom's and my best friend's mom's romance novels, like the dirtier ones that you're not supposed to read, I read one called A Knight in Shining Armor, which is this like classic hetero romance. And it's this woman who goes back in time and she falls in love, but she gets sent back to her own... I'm going to go ahead and spoil it because who cares? Like, this is a lesbian podcast. We don't give a shit here, is what I'm saying. So, if I'm remembering this correctly, she gets sent back to her own time. So she's not with the man she fell in love with, but then at the end she, like, meets his descendant. And I was like, what was that? I'm invested in her relationship with this dude from the past. I don't care about his descendant, and I guess it's kind of sort of the same, but except it's not really. So I don't want the ones like that. I want the ones where whoever they fall in love with is whoever they end up with at the end, because otherwise I feel like I've been betrayed.
So we actually have several across-time romances that we have reviewed on the site, and I just love them. So Christabel by Karin Kallmaker is an across-time romance. But what she did is she took it as... So they don't travel in time per se, but there's a parallel storyline between kind of their former lives, if you like, and their current lives, right? And there's generations in between, so they're kind of ancestors of themselves almost. It's like she did it so beautifully. It's all about the storytelling, and it's all about the resolution, and it's all about the romance in the end, and they get together, because it's a romance, right? Mm-hmm. But it opens up these amazing things that you can do with the story, like you can set it in a historical time frame and a current time frame, and then mash the two together, right?
I do want to read. There's one, Carson Tate talked about it on the podcast, and Brooklyn loved it, called Spark by Catherine Friend. Have you read or heard that? Have you read or listened to that one?
I haven't yet, but it's definitely on my to-read list because I love these. I'm telling you, you'll love them too once you kind of find the right ones, and there are some excellent ones. I believe we're going to see more of those in 2018 because I think it's a very underutilized market.
All right. So what else did we see? Whether they were our predictions or not, what else did we see in 2017 that was different?
We saw an interesting rise of independent publishers in 2017, and in a different way to what we saw in 2016, because in 2016 we saw a lot of people self-publishing but getting quite professional about it. But in 2017 we saw almost like groups of people starting little publishing houses. So whether they be two spouses starting little publishing house and getting some other authors to join, or whether we see groups of friends or whatever it is. So we saw some of that happening. And I think that trend is actually going to continue into 2018. And what I like about this trend as opposed to just the self-publishing is that it's we're getting a lot of professional marketing out of that.
Yes.
And I think the sector's desperately in need of more professional marketing and sort of very focused, like, efforts on getting the Lesfic to the right readers.
Yeah, I'll say with that rise, this was actually the first year that I even saw marketing tactics like targeted ads on Facebook, which, more authors and publishers should be doing. They should be investing in targeted ads if they have people that are following their pages, that are liking their authors or whatever. Like, it's just a smart way to get more views on what they're putting out. So I was really happy to see that, and I'm hoping we're going to see more of that. Like, when I'm on Amazon and I'm going to gather the book information for the reviews for the Lesbian Review, I'm starting to see more targeted marketing on Amazon from lesbian fiction like these small groups or self-publishers. So I think the larger publishers are doing some good work, but they could actually, like, if they pay attention to what some of these smaller groups are doing, they could also see some gains as well. The other thing that I noticed this year is it feels like 2017 was the year that Lesfic covers as a whole have gotten so much better.
I absolutely agree with you. We actually predicted that Lesfic covers would get better this year. That was another one of the predictions we made last year, and I'm so happy that that's come to what is this saying?
Fruition?
Yes, thank you. That's come to fruition. And I think we're going to see even better ones going into next year. I think what's happening is the lesbian fiction market is maturing, and as it matures, the leaders, the people who are producing the excellent content, who are doing the marketing and stuff, are setting the trend for what the others are going to start following and doing. Of course, we still see the fembots, unfortunately. But life goes on.
But it's good to see that even a lot of the self-published authors are doing excellent covers. So it's getting to where I kind of hope that some authors and publishers will look at their books from 10 years ago and maybe consider redesigning some of those, just because it will help so much when they're selling.
And this is what's actually an interesting thing for me is people are producing audiobooks now from books that were published 10 years ago. Okay, and they're keeping the ugly ass covers, and I'm like, why would you do that? Mm-hmm. So let's hope that, going forward, they're going to put a little bit of time into actually revamping the whole thing, because that would be good.
And that's, we've seen that as Anne McMahon, who is hands down one of the best cover artists going in the industry, and as we all know how much I love her just in general as an author and artist. But something that she's done that I think is brilliant is, as she is re-releasing her books through Bywater, she is totally redoing the covers, and they are all gorgeous and they all look amazing. Like they all look like they're being released now.
Absolutely. They give a whole new life to the product entirely, and they update it to a much more usable product for today's market. Because the fembot covers were fine 10 years ago when there was a limited amount of Lesfic, but now when you're competing on a mainstream level, you've got to compete on a mainstream level.
Absolutely. So my one, I don't have many predictions for next year. I think you're a much better prognosticator than I am. But my one prediction is tied to a trend that we also saw this year, which is the rise of genres other than romance. So romance continues to stay strong, and I think it's always going to. Mm-hmm. But we saw other genres like thrillers really come up this year. Mm-hmm. And it's happening in a way that's really exciting. And I actually think that the big thing for next year is going to be all about the immersive reads. Like, what are the books that you can absolutely lose yourself in? Which isn't to say that there won't be excellent literary fiction coming out, or that you can't immerse yourself in literary fiction. But I think those, like the romance, the thriller, the sci-fi, the things that will suck you in, that will take you away from it all, politics around the world, with the exception of Australia finally getting their act together and making marriage equality happen, politics are a garbage fire. They just are. It is depressing to flick through Twitter, to watch the news, to go on Facebook. It's all kind of makes you want to despair. But if you can have those books that you can lose yourself in and get away from it for whether it's 15 minutes to 10 hours, I think that's what's going to help people, because reading really is self-care. And it's the thing that, it's one of those things that people can do to be good to themselves, to give themselves just a nice psychological break. And that's why I think those are the genres that are going to dominate next year.
I agree with you. Well, not dominate. We'll still see a domination of romance, but I agree with you entirely about the sci-fi and the thrillers. We're going to see a massive increase in both of those sectors. I think also we're going to see an increase in not just those sectors, but series. People wanting series in those sectors for the same reason, because they want the immersive experience. So, tying on to that, what I think is also going to happen is the mainstream publishers are going to start producing more books with LGBTQ characters in them. And so we're going to see a rise of that in the mainstream. So what's going to happen is we are going to, the lesbian fiction section over the next few years, the lesbian fiction market is going to open up more to the mainstream, which is where thrillers are second sellers only to romance. And so it makes complete sense that that's going to, be a big seller at some point. So I think people who are writing thrillers and sci-fi and stuff now just need to keep doing it, because you need the product before you can get the audience,
Do we think that 2018 will be the year that finally more mainstream romance readers will be able to come and see and find lesbian romance? Because I'm still seeing a lot of people on Twitter saying, where is it? I can't find it. My gut is telling me it's probably not going to be 2018, but it might be 2019 or 2020.
I think 2020 is more likely. But I'll tell you, I think people, the mainstream, is more likely to adopt the incidental lesbian books, like thrillers, like sci-fi, like that sort of thing, rather than romance. I think we're not at a point yet in the world where people want to read about others falling in love with others, right? Unless you are that other. I mean, there are some curious people and whatever, but I just don't think people are at an accepting point yet.
No, and it's interesting though, because there is that thriving market of straight women who are buying romances that feature two men falling in love.
Yeah.
But it's like they don't want to identify with either character. Like, it's too close to home if it's two women.
Yeah. I think you're pretty spot on. I think it's escapism, and women don't want to be able to put themselves in the position where they're either of the characters necessarily. So it's easier to objectify two guys than it is to objectify two women for a woman. And I think that might be why gay, I must say, I don't understand it at all, like not even vaguely, like it would bore me to tears, but I suspect that's the reasoning. But thrillers can cross the boundary, and sci-fi can cross the boundary quite successfully with lesbian characters. So let's see that happen. Let's push that. Publishers, you can do this.
So, do you have any other big predictions for next year?
No, those are pretty much the things that I think we're going to see. An interesting thing on Facebook, which is not particular to lesbian fiction so much, but it's particular to the groups, the Facebook groups that revolve around lesbian fiction. There are many lesbian fiction groups on Facebook. What I'm seeing now is the ones that want to remain relevant are creating a very unique space. So they're doing something that the other groups are not doing, right? In order to keep the audience interested and not just flocking to, the other groups.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to see more of that happening, because I think that just what that does is it broadens it cracks open the audience and gives you new spaces that you can explore lesbian fiction online.
Yes, just have that focused vision of what you're going to have in that group and then let that vision flourish.
Absolutely. So don't try copy the other groups. If you can create your own unique space, like Kay Ann's group at one point was doing quite regular on the block things where she did interviews with interesting people in the sector,
Yes.
and that was really cool from that for that group. So I want to see the groups doing more of that kind of individual stuff and really identifying, like, this is what I want to do, because I believe we can all coexist very happily together, but we need to create unique spaces.
What about podcasts? Are there any lesbian fiction podcast predictions for this year?
Not lesbian fiction alone, but I actually think we're going to see a rise in podcasts in general for the lesbian market. I do think we're going to see some book podcasts appearing as well, especially now that we've broken open that market in terms of just like, look, we can talk about all sorts of different things around books. So I think publishers are going to be getting into podcasts, and if they're not, they really should be thinking about it.
Oh my goodness, yes, they absolutely should.
Mm.
That would be a great way to connect readers with their authors and to hear about the things they care about, how they're writing their books. See, we're coming up with their marketing plan for them.
And it takes a lot. I think producing a podcast, I don't think people realize how much work goes into producing a podcast. Producing a podcast is actually a lot of work. It's more work than doing a review. It's more work than, any of the other sort of stuff that we do. Because it takes a lot of planning. You have to know, from the beginning what you want to achieve with the podcast, and then you have to put it all together. And that's not always an easy thing. So podcasts there's a bigger barrier to entry than something like a Facebook group or something like a blog or a website even.
Mm-hmm.
But you almost get more intimate with your listeners, with your audience, than you can with something like a blog.
Yeah, it allows for other possibilities that are a lot of fun to explore, and you kind of never know what's going to happen in a conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I think that's all for this episode. Thank you so much, Sheena, for joining me.
You are so welcome, Tara.
I'm Tara. You've been listening to Les Do Books. Remember to email me at tara@thelesbianreview.com with your questions or comments. Don't forget to join us at our Facebook group, The Lesbian Review Book Club, so you can talk to us about anything you're reading and loving. You can also find me and all the other podcasters on the Lesbian Talk Show channel at our Facebook group, The Lesbian Talk Show Chat Group. If you've enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to rate the show and subscribe. To find this and many other great shows, all you need to do is search for The Lesbian Talk Show on iTunes, Podbean, or Stitcher.
Dum, 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 dum. That was very exciting.
It was. I'm going to stop recording.